Eylon Levy, spokesperson for the Israeli government. Eylon, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt.
So you heard those two voices there, two of your staunchest allies, the United States and the United Kingdom, putting pressure on the Israeli government to do more to allow the aid in. Are you listening to them?
Of course, that is why we have increased capacity to get aid into Gaza and are working on new ways to get aid directly to civilians without going through Hamas. Our policy is that we want aid to reach the civilians who need it and make sure that Hamas cannot steal it. Now, of course, delivering aid in a war zone is a fiendishly difficult task, but I can tell you what we've been doing. There is currently excess capacity at Israel's crossings to admit more aid through the land route. In fact, just now, over the last 2 weeks, we've had a rolling average of 102 food trucks a day, which is nearly 50% more than before the war. We have no restrictions on food, water, medicine, or shelter equipment, and we're working on new ways to get aid to civilians. The problem isn't getting aid into Gaza. The problem is getting it around Gaza. The problem is distribution. That's why we're working together with the private sector on organizing aid convoys so that we don't have to rely on UNRWA, which has been complicit with Hamas. It's why we're encouraging the UN to activate other aid agencies.
Hang on a second. UNRWA being complicit with Hamas? That's one hell of an accusation to level against a UN organization. I know there are the 12 UNRWA employees who've been sacked for allegedly taking part in the October the 7th attacks. But the entire organization complicit with Hamas?
Absolutely.
Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence, Eylon? Where's the evidence?
Well, I'll give you one example. Hamas ran its main intelligence base from a tunnel directly underneath UNRWA's main headquarters in Gaza and was leaching electricity from the offices
Does that make the UN complicit?
It makes UNRWA absolutely complicit with Hamas. UNRWA systematically turns a blind eye to how Hamas hijacks aid. It relies on Hamas for protection.
What about all the reports sorry to interrupt you, what about the reports that actually some of the aid trucks that are inside the Gaza Strip can't get to the north where they're most needed because the IDF won't let them through?
So getting aid in a disaster area is a notoriously difficult task. On Thursday, 15 World Food Programme trucks did make it north in the Gaza Strip.
15?
The previous day there was a convoy. Yes,
That's a trickle. They need hundreds.
Not in the north, no. The previous day, there was a convoy that wasn't able to get through because the road was blocked by tens of thousands of Palestinians, and we feared a similar looting incident like the one that caused a previous stampede. So we're having private sector convoys going into the north, working together with the World Food Programme, now working together with the Americans on this maritime corridor from Cyprus, which we welcome and we encourage countries to send aid through. And of course, the airdrops as well.
Right. It would be so much easier there, wouldn't it? And we hear this from aid organizations and indeed from the US administration. It would be so much easier in terms of actually saving Palestinian lives faced with famine. I don't know if you've seen the pictures of young kids who look, just in a terrible state because they haven't had a meal for God knows how many weeks. It would be so much easier just to open those gates, have checks at the border by all means, to make sure that the right stuff gets in, but open those land gates and then allow the aid to come in that way. Because, 60 days to build a pontoon, that's a long time. In those 60 days, many more people will die unnecessarily.
Well, aid is entering through the Kerem Shalom crossing, and we have capacity to get more aid through Kerem Shalom. I've seen suggestions that aid might go in through the Erez crossing, but a little bit of a reality check. The Erez crossing is a pedestrian crossing, not a truck crossing. On October 7th, Hamas destroyed the Erez crossing. They murdered the people who worked there, ran the crossings, and took hostages. And since then, it's been firing rockets and mortars at that site, making it impossible or very difficult to get close to that area. So Kerem Shalom is open. That was before the war, the main goods entrance into the Gaza Strip. Over the last week, we managed to reach a record 270 trucks going through Kerem Shalom and Rafah in a single day. And there's excess capacity for more to enter through those crossings.
But that's not what we're hearing from the UN. This line about excess capacity is not what we're hearing from the aid organizations. They're saying that actually there was a larger number of trucks coming through in January. It then went down in February, and it's still nowhere near the 450 trucks that went across the border before the war.
I know, but look, this is a misnomer, Matt, because the 500 trucks that went in before the war, they were not all aid trucks. They were total good trucks, including industrial supplies and construction equipment, which Hamas diverted for its tunnels, but that's a different question. Construction equipment that, for obvious reasons, is not entering during this war. In terms of food, over the last 2 weeks, there have been 46% more food trucks every day entering the Gaza Strip.
And yet there is still famine, right? So
we're talking about...
But if the Israeli government tried harder to let more trucks in, you would not get people starving in Gaza.
Matt, we're in a horrific situation now because Hamas decided on October 7th to declare war with a barbaric massacre and to wage that war from inside civilian areas. Now, as we take the fight to Hamas to free the hostages who are being raped right now in the Hamas terror dungeons, that's what the UN confirmed this week. As we fight to get the hostages back and dismantle the rest of Hamas's terrorist army, so it can never do this again and again as it is threatening to do. We are doing our utmost to facilitate the provision of aid to civilians who need it, while we know that Hamas is hijacking aid. By the way, at the beginning of the war, President Biden said, if we know Hamas is hijacking the aid's going to stop. It's not stopping. We want more aid to reach the civilians who need it. Unfortunately, Hamas is hijacking it, and that makes it
What's the evidence
difficult.
For that? Again, what's the evidence for the fact that Hamas is hijacking the aid and not giving it to the civilians?
Have you not seen the videos of Hamas gunmen on top of aid trucks? Have you not seen the videos of aid?
We don't know that, do we? That could be hijacking of aid, or could be making sure that you don't get another stampede, as we did, repeatedly in recent days when trucks go in. Right?
Do you think that Hamas terrorists who have built their tunnel shafts into schools and kindergartens are waiting calmly in line to receive their rations from the UN? Or do you think that, like everything else they have done in the Gaza Strip, they are prioritizing the well-being of their military fighters and diverting aid for their work? By the way, look, Matt, listen,
Eylon, I think civilians are getting a short. I think civilians are getting a short shrift, either from Hamas or from the IDF.
You're asking me for evidence, and I'd like to give you evidence. I'd like to give you evidence.
Go on.
Okay, at the beginning of this war, October 16th, I think it was, UNRWA tweeted that people purporting to be from the Ministry of Health, that is Hamas, stole fuel and medicine from one of their warehouses in Gaza. They tweeted this. They admitted that Hamas had stolen aid from UNRWA headquarters. Now, they later deleted that tweet under pressure.
I remember that, yes. I think we argued about it at some stage on the airwaves. I don't deny the fact that this may have happened, right? These things happen. At the end of the day, though, the situation for civilians inside the Gaza Strip is desperate. And are you not? Is there no part of you, Eylon Levy, that is either troubled, or possibly even ashamed by the fact that on your watch, because it's the IDF that does control security in Gaza, on your watch, thousands of people could die from famine. I mean, I'm not even talking about the bombing, but from famine. Tens of thousands, if possible. Right? This is just appalling. Does that not give you pause for thought? Does that not keep you awake at night for even 5 minutes?
Man, no one downplays the disaster that Hamas has brought on the people of Gaza by declaring war with a barbaric massacre and choosing to fight that war from inside and under civilian buildings. It's horrific. We wish this war had never started.
It's incumbent on you, though, according to the rules of war, to make sure that civilians aren't unnecessarily killed. And even your best friends in Washington think that on that front, Eylon Levy, your government's done a pretty lousy job.
Actually, no, Matt. Our friends in Washington who prosecuted the war against ISIS in Mosul know exactly how difficult it is to target terrorists who are hiding among a civilian population. Matt, according to the United Nations, in urban wars, 90% of casualties are usually civilians. Now, even if you accept the Hamas figures at face value, and we don't, because Hamas is a terrorist organization that lies and has zero international accountability. But let's say we believe the Hamas numbers. And we know that we have killed 13,000 terrorists. And we know that many people have been killed through rockets of Hamas that have misfired and fallen short inside Gaza, like the incident at the Al
Let me
Ahli
ask you one final. I really don't want to relitigate. I don't want to go over stuff that we've talked about endlessly. I want to just. We've gone on far too long already.
Just one. You asked a question, Matt, and you haven't let me answer it.
But you have answered it with it. You've answered it with the usual. With the usual answer. I just want to make it more interesting for our poor listeners. The final question is this, and this is something raised by Gershon Baskin, a fellow Israeli citizen who I spoke to an hour ago or so. He said the only way, actually, that you can defeat Hamas, and he's no fan, let's be clear, is to hold out the prospect of a dignified solution for the Palestinian people. In other words, for the UK and the US, especially the US, to recognize a Palestinian state in return for all those countries that don't recognize an Israeli state in the Middle East, and there are quite a few that still don't, to do the same. And that's how you move forward. Agree or not agree?
No, we want to build a pathway towards peace with our neighbors. We think that pathway runs through de-radicalization and helping the Palestinians abandon the dream of destroying Israel from the river to the sea.
But what about some dignity on the horizon?
We think, absolutely, we think that Hamas has brutalized the Palestinian children with their indoctrination towards hate and violence, and the world has to focus on de-radicalization so that we can have a peaceful future. But the lesson of October 7th, the October 7 atrocities when they burned people alive and raped girls, cannot be remembered in Palestinian collective memory as something that pushed their cause forward. If the world were to take steps towards recognizing a Palestinian state, the message that they would be telling the Palestinians is that the atrocities of October 7th worked.
But look at Northern Ireland. I hear what you're saying, Eylon, but look at Northern Ireland, where the darkest hour was literally before dawn. There was the Good Friday Agreement, came after some terrible, terrorist attacks by the IRA. And look where Northern Ireland and Ireland is now. So actually, it is precisely these appalling events. And I'm not making light of any of it, to be honest. It is precisely these appalling events that necessarily force people to look at a political solution.
No, Matt, you cannot tell Hamas that abducted people and is using them as sex slaves right now, that it works. The message from the international community cannot be that you can mutilate little children in front of their parents, bound people and burn them alive, and that will take your cause forward. The Palestinians have to understand that terrorism is a dead end. There's no light at the end of that tunnel. And there has to be a price for launching the deadliest terror attack in world history.
Well, I mean, they would say conversely, you cannot bomb, you can't bomb families in their apartment blocks and kill them wholesale and use that as an excuse for moving forward either.
If this brutal, sadistic, premeditated massacre is remembered by the Palestinians as something that took their cause forward, you will be encouraging further terrorism and atrocities, and the blood will be on your hands, on the hands of whoever sends that message that terrorism works.
Okay. Eylon Levy, thanks very much for coming on the program, as ever. And I have to say, the Israeli government is very good at putting up spokespeople. They are very ready to talk. I have to say, the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah is less good at doing that. For all the time I spent in Israel and in the West Bank, there was never anyone who was prepared to speak on behalf of the Palestinian Authority. It would be good if that were to change as well.